welcome to this meeting, Israeli Settler Colonialism, the Endgame. We have the absolutely brilliant Ilan Pappe, who is a professor of history at Exeter University. We've waited long enough. Without further ado, Ilan, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I also want to mention that nowadays I'm also the chair of the Nakba Memorial Foundation in Britain, devoted to the struggle against Nakba denial in Britain, in the world. For those who are interested, you can look our website. There's plenty of good stuff there. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be part of this great endeavor. And as happened recently, I'm doing it more on Zoom than in person, which really saddens me because I know so many of you, and I would have loved to see you in person. So I do hope at least next year to be there in person. So let me go straight to the topic I was asked to talk about. I think we have to make sure that when we use such a term as the settler colonial a project of Israel, and we ask about the end game of Israel's settler colonial project, to be careful not to be too much bound by the academic term settler colonialism, because it can sound abstract and theoretical. And remember that, as in other places in history, settler colonial projects create states. They create organic societies, they create armies, they create sometimes empires like the United States. So I just want to make sure that when we start to talk about it, that we realize that the settler colonial project is really something that can grow into such proportions and such levels of power, of force, that do not only impact the native indigenous people in whose country the settlers have settled, and in many cases took over, sometimes genocided the indigenous people, sometimes ethnically cleansed them, but to make sure that we understand that this initial act of takeover can grow into a very powerful state, a very powerful political formation that can influence and is influencing sometimes not only the country into which the settlers came, but the region around it, and sometimes the world at large. So I think it's very, very important to remember this. Another point which I think is good to remember is the difference between the initial objective, or if you want, the initial endgame of the Zionist settler colonial project in Palestine, and the way that these objectives have changed over time, and what are they, and how are they being interpreted, and how are they being realized right now in our time. So let me start by reminding us about the initial endgame, if you want, of the settler colonial project. And it's easier to identify the initial ones than the endgame that develops later, because at the initial stages of any settler colonial project, we're talking about a rather small group of people, a project that is just in the beginning, and an historical case for which we have quite a lot of sources as historians if we want to reconstruct what people were thinking and what they did in a limited period of time. So the initial, definitely the initial purpose of the settler colonial project, if you want, the end game of the early founders of Zionism, was first of all to create a modern Jewish identity, a modern Jewish collective identity. Some of its conceivers, some of its early leaders and intellectuals were even thinking about a modern socialist Jewish identity that would replace the religious, more traditional Jewish identity that the early Zionists believed was one of the main reasons for anti-Semitism. Therefore, they connected the redefinition of Judaism as a national identity and the building of a place where Jews would leave behind them traditional professions and become laborers and agricultural cultivators would create physically and mentally a different kind of a Jew, if you want, the modern Jew. Uh, and uh, and although not all of them immediately thought that Palestine had to be the place where this kind of a new Jew would emerge, later on, especially in the beginning of the 20th century, they connected it to romantic nationalist ideas that if you want for this project of creating a new Jew to succeed, you needed to do it in the ancient biblical homeland of the Jews, Palestine. I think a second endgame developed a bit later. And this was the moment it was clear that if you want to connect the making of a modern Jew as a panacea for anti-Semitism and implement a romantic nationalist idea of having your own homeland where this project of modernization would take place, that if that's what you wanted to be, you actually wanted to colonize the place and to get rid of the indigenous people. And for that, you needed to connect yourself to a colonial power, that you could not do it by yourself, definitely, given the number of Jews, their history, their capacities. So the end game from very early on was to say, you need to be organically, ideologically, and most importantly, economically connected to the system, the economic system and the political system of an empire that, like you, wants to take over parts of another continent, of another country or another region. And that's where the connection to Britain became so powerful and enabled, in fact, the Zionists to translate theoretical ideas of a modern Jewish state into reality through the mandatory system between 1918 to 1948. The problem, of course, for those who were more socialists, leaning or towards a socialist interpretation of modern Judaism or even modern Zionism, was that the moment they connected themselves to the Western economic system, first the colonialist Anglo-French one, and then the American one, of course, the whole ideas of socialism were thrown out to the dustbin of history as far as they were concerned. And liberalism, neo-capitalism, and the rules of the game in the West were as important and motivating the end game of Zionism as the ideology of taking over Palestine from the Palestinians and having as much of Palestine as possible with as few Palestinians as possible. The second stage where the original endgame becomes a bit different because of the changing circumstances and the realities was a total focus, which I think begins in the 1920s, definitely is already articulated clearly as an endgame in the 1930s, is really the focus on two dimensions in the settler colonial project of Zionism. How much land can we take from historical Palestine? And what do we do with the people who live on that land? And it was very clear that the more land you take, the more undesired people you have on it. And the historical circumstances, which I know so many of you are so familiar with, which I'm not going to go into, that enabled the Zionist movement in 1948 to take over almost 80% of historical Palestine, was logically, from the end game's point of view of the settler colonial project, accompanied by the ethnic cleansing of almost 1 million Palestinians, half of Palestine's Arab population, and more than 80%, or actually nearly 90% of the population, the Palestinian population that lived in what became the State of Israel in 1948. And these two elements, the land, taking over the land, and the getting rid of the people, were the two elements that informed the thinking about the end game of the settler colonial state of Israel, also during the 67 June War, or as it is more known as the 6 Days War, where it was decided to take over the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and to have total control over all historical Palestine. And then understanding that that territorial appetite, that land grabbing, would create new demographic challenges, as the Zionist discourse would have it, namely, you got rid of almost 1 million Palestinians in 1948, and now you're incorporating in 1967 another 1.5 million Palestinians. What is so interesting about the 1967 policymakers in Israel, when they are discussing the end game at that particular period, is that they still think for a moment that they can repeat 1948, namely that they can take the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and ethnically cleanse massively the people who live there. But they understand a little bit later that the circumstances of 67 are not the circumstances of 1948, and they decide to substitute the idea of how you get the land without the people through different methods than massive expulsions, which they did in 1948. And then they create something which I think is quite unique. I tried as an historian to see if anybody else was building similar political constructions. And maybe there are some similar, but not identical, that's for sure. And this is what I called in one of my books the mega prison model. That is to say that you take millions of people and you include them in your territory, but you make sure that they are not part of the demography. What does it mean? That they are under your rule, but they have no say at all in the way, in the policies towards them, and in the future, more importantly, maybe than anything else. And you take into account that that kind of an imposition of millions of people would be resisted, will be resisted. And if it is resisted, you already beforehand decide what would you do if there's millions of inmates, if you want, in the mega prisons that you created in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip would rebel, what would you do with them? And it was very clear that you have to use what the Israelis in very terrible kind of metaphoric, euphemistic way describe as the stick and carrot policy. Namely, if you are willing to live in the mega prisons that we created for you in 67, you might enjoy what one can call the model of an open prison, which means that you have some autonomy in running your own affairs, but you will still have no basic civic rights, of course, of voting and electing, and you have no say in running the big aspects of your life, and definitely not any share in determining your future. Now, if you have aspirations which are beyond the open prison, namely, if you want to liberate yourself from occupation and colonialism and all the oppressive behavior that goes along even with the model of an open prison, which includes basic and daily abuse of the people of Palestine, whether they are in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. If you rebel against it, if you revolt against it, then you will be punished with the model of a maximum security prison, which will have a lot of, which will have in it a series of collective punishments, which we know from the history of Palestine from 1967 until today, whether it's massive arrests without trial, demolition of houses, expulsions, summary executions, and other horrific measures that a very powerful state can impose on helpless and defenseless population living in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. It's very strange to talk about it as an endgame, because what you see here is an idea, and it's always very difficult to explain it to an outside audience, because in Israel, the strategy and the tactics are the same. This is an endgame from an Israeli perspective, and we even saw it in a more bizarre, I would say, only insane version after the 7th of October. And I'll explain what I mean. The end game is that you, since you cannot get rid of the millions of the Palestinians who live in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and probably you have not solved the problem by expelling so many Palestinians, because the refugees live very near to the Palestine borders, and they created their own national liberation movement. And the region, at least the societies in the region and the societies in the world, support this liberation struggle. Because of all that, the end game is that you will have to sustain yourself through endless oppression of the people inside and a struggle against their liberation movement on the outside. There's no end game that visualizes a successful even taking over or winning this struggle inside or outside. So this also explains why Israel invested so much in an apparatus of oppression that in my recent kind of research, I found out that at least 170,000 Israelis are employed directly in all the mechanisms that are there to police the Palestinians, whether in the West Bank, whether in the Gaza Strip, whether they are the Palestinian citizens of Israel, or whether it's part of the struggle against the Palestinian liberation struggle outside of the boundaries of Palestine. Now, from a capitalist point of view, for instance, this is not bad news, because it means that there's a lot of money to be gained if you are involved directly in this matrix of power, or indirectly through, arms industry, security industry, you can be in the construction business, and you will be called to build apartheid walls, barriers, all kinds of, cutting edge technologies to help monitor and supervise the mega prisons that you create. And it seems that they think about it as a way of life that you can educate the next generation to take it as for granted, as Michel Foucault would have put it, as if there is no other option. And why do I say that the 7th of October produced a particular chilling version of that? What the Hamas assault on Israel proved was that whatever they thought the Palestinian rebellions would look like in the past, or whatever they experienced, in terms of the way the Palestinians rebel against this mega prisons of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and the whole settler colonialism project in historical Palestine, whatever they had experienced in the past, did not prepare them to the attack of the 7th of October. And so far, the reaction in terms of the conversation in Israel about the end game as the process of learning from what happened on the 7th of October is that the answer to the surprise, to the trauma, it's a traumatized society now, is that the metrics of power, the systems of power, the mechanisms of power, of oppression, the 170,000 who are involved in this directly, all of this is not enough. Otherwise, it would not have happened. And therefore, we have to double and to triple our ability to oppress, to occupy. And if we had some moral inhibitions in the past about expulsion, summary execution, genocidal policies, let's remove them, because apparently in this internal discourse, this is another reason for our weakness. Contrary to what probably most normal people around the world would tell them should be the lesson from the 7th of October. But, we as a good friend of mine says, Israelis think that Hebrew is a secret language that nobody understands. Some of us read Hebrew, so we know enough about these internal discussions and deliberations about the end game. Sorry. So this is the end game in general. The end game is a lack of horizon from a normal perspective of human beings, promising a society much of the same, but even in a worse way. Worse, I mean, in the aspects of bloodshed, of violence, frequency of wars, um, and an economic system that would perpetuate the gap between the have and the have-nots, that would divert money, already started, divert money from social needs into more money invested in military and security, almost redoubling the efforts of making Israel an army with a state rather than a state with an army. So two things towards the end. One is that there is, of course, a specific conversation, which I think many of you may be interested in, about the endgame in Gaza. So the endgame of Gaza, as Israeli policymakers see it, is between two kinds of components in the political and military elite of Israel. One of them is very much fed by what I called many times the state of Judea. This is the political force that emerged in the settlements in the occupied West Bank. They already have detailed plans to build settlements in the Gaza Strip and massively expel as many Palestinians as they can to the other side of the border, to Sinai, and building there, with the help of the Egyptians, a mega city for refugees, and hoping that other countries will take the people of Gaza to their countries. And they want the military operations to continue because they're not happy with the result, because of the resilience of the Hamas. Most of their ideas of destroying the Hamas, eliminating the Hamas, are not unfolding at all on the ground. And they want then to move to the West Bank and impose that model on the West Bank again, namely a powerful expulsion and Judaization of the West Bank, creating an almost pure Jewish historical Palestine, but also one which is more theocratic and racist. Then there is the other component of that elite that thinks it can reignite the prison model, the open prison model, which is now operating, to their mind, relatively successful in the West Bank. They hope to do it with the Palestinian Authority or any other local collaborative Palestinian elite, if they can find it, in the Gaza Strip, and then go on with the daily kind of maintenance of this kind of a settler colonial state, busy financially, economically, strategically, ideologically, and culturally, in being a big company of jailers and wardens of two mega prisons, and hoping that somehow in the pockets people could still enjoy life and remain very high as they are on the level of people who are happy with life in different countries in the world. Finally, let me say that this is collapsing. This is what they want. This is the end game. You can see that rationally, even logically, this cannot be maintained. Secondly, if you look at it empirically now, on the level of economics, of social cohesion, of international standing, of the trends within the younger Palestinian society, the international isolation, the changes in the Jewish communities in the world towards this project. This is a project in the process of collapsing, of disintegrating. It's not working. And because these processes of collapsing can take time, it's a very dangerous phase in the history, especially for the Palestinians, because it will become more fierce and more brutal in trying to keep this and maintain it together. The hope is that also the lack of horizon, actually, for the people of Israel itself, is another internal dynamic that may accelerate the collapse and hopefully create a void that would enable the Palestinian liberation movement to fill it with a different political structure, a different horizon, which I think would be a win-win situation, both for Jews and for Palestinians, if it's based on a democratic socialist state in Palestine. But we're not there yet. We are in the process of the collapse. We're in the process where people are beginning to talk about the alternatives very differently from the way the mainstream politics, diplomacy, and media are talking about this, namely the dead two-state solution. There is this conversation, which is very important. There is the collapse. There is the brutality that accompanies the collapse. And this is our role in Britain and in other places to shorten the period of the collapse, because this is a period of genocide, brutality, and everything you're seeing now, even on a worse, even on a level which is far worse than the one we are witnessing today. So the more we can help to shorten this period, the more life in Palestine will save, and the more galvanized we are, the more we can help create that moment of history, which I'm really convinced will come, where progressive forces in Palestine would be able to build a different future, a future that would radiate and influence the countries around Palestine, who are also in need of a social, economic, and political transformation, if not revolution, because there's so many millions of people in the Arab world who are hungry or angry, who are not living the way they deserve to live. Much of their ability to transform life for themselves depends on our ability to help Palestine become a beacon for the future for them as well. This is a part of the world that deserves much better, has the capacity to build a different world. If we can limit the external intervention that prevented it from dealing with its issues, starting in Palestine, I do believe that we can ensure a different future for the people of the Arab world as well as the people of Palestine. So I will stop here and thank you for your patience.
Hi, my name's Mary Evers. I'm Irish. I was raised in Palestine during the 60s and 70s. I've seen a huge change in the country. A lot of what Mr. Pappe has said, I've been aware of all my life. What I'd like to ask Mr. Pappe is what he feels about the surrounding Arabic countries and their reluctance to get involved. Is it that they're afraid that their own population are going to turn against them and want the same sort of democratic state that we all hope the Palestinians will be afforded? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The comrade with the glasses here will be followed by the comrade at the back.
Thank you very much, Ilan. My name is Rob Ferguson. Ilan, I want to put a question to you, which I'll elaborate on, and I'm interested in your view, because you've described very powerfully the internal crisis of the Zionist project and its trajectory from before 1948 right through to today, and the two end games that the different wings, if you like, of the Zionist project are now contesting with each other. One is the envisaging the another wave of ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the West Bank, and the other, as you put it, the reigniting of the prison and stepping up the repression. I'm not saying you think this, but isn't there a risk there that we kind of open ourselves up to a kind of auto-destruct vision of, you know, the end of the Zionist project? Because it seems to me that there is another crisis alongside the internal one, which also relates to the foundation of the Zionist project, that of a fortress of imperialist interests in the Middle East. And that is now subject to the crisis of the imperialist order in the Middle East, for reasons I don't have time to go into. But right at the heart of that is the prime object of one of the main objects of the support by imperialism for Israel was to act as a discipline of the danger of revolt from the Arab masses against the Arab regimes. And isn't that equation now really bearing down on the Zionist project alongside the internal crisis, external threat? And isn't it there that we also need to set our gaze and our vision in order to bring about the end of the settler colonial project that you've described?
Fantastic, thank you. The comrade right at the back will be followed by the comrade at the front, who's not looking at me, so I won't know. Just you'll be after this speaker. Is that okay? Yeah, well, hopefully. Yeah, you. Yeah, you wanted to speak. Yeah, great. Sorry, thanks everyone. Great, go for it.
Thank you, Ilan. And I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this. I do want to express gratitude to you for your work, which is of enormous significance to those of us who over the years have worked with solidarity with Palestine. I'm going to keep this brief because Rob Ferguson, who's just spoken, has taken up the issue that I'm concerned about, which is that you've spelled out that from the very beginning, it was necessary for the, if you like, godfathers of the Zionist movement to align themselves with imperial powers in the region. And of course, in the case of the British were only too pleased to accept the invitation to work with the Zionist movement and to inhibit, for example, the Palestinian resistance of the 1930s. And this has continued, and it's continued through the post-war period. Something very striking is that at key moments in the 60s and 70s, when the imperialist powers had difficulties with their allies, for example, the Iranian Revolution, which brought down the Shah, who was so important to Western oil interests, bingo, the aid and support and weaponry that goes to Israel, increases almost the day after the fall of the Shah. So the importance of Israel to the imperialist project, of course, particularly to oil interests and the oil corporations, is critical. So my question, which supplements in a way Rob's question, is that there is a global dynamic relating to Western imperialism, particularly the dedication, the sort of commitment of Western capitalism to the fossil fuel industry. Is there a replacement for Israel? Is there some other strategy at hand? How do these external issues sit alongside your analysis of the internal crisis of the settler colonial project? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The comrade at the front here with the keffiyeh will be followed by the comrade at the back in the green fleece.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a very interesting, really, really short lecture, which should be maybe about 4 hours, but thank you. You mentioned that we are in the process of the collapse of Israel, which is, well, the Zionist Israel, which is what we all are hoping for. But you also said that the period of collapse should be shortened, and we should support progressive forces in Palestine and Israel to build a democratic state with freedom and rights for all, which is what we all want. But oh, this is a big question. But how is this done? It can go either way. It can go either way, and the collapse, it can end up with non-progressive forces taking the power as well. So it's kind of, how do we support the progressive forces? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The comrade in the fleece at the back will be followed by the comrade here that's like, you, thanks.
Hello, Ilan. Charlie Kimber, the editor of Socialist Worker. I just want to add to what Comrade said earlier. Millions of us been on a educational journey during the last 9 months. And I want to put it on record that your writings on 1948, on the subsequent history, on demolishing the myths of Zionism, and also your refusal to bow the knee to your critics has been incredibly important for all of us. And thank you. About 6 months ago, you wrote a piece in which you said Israel had now lost all moral authority, and this was crucial in terms of thinking about how Zionism would end. I think that's absolutely true. We can miss it sometimes in the heartland of the Imperial West, that the vast majority of the world's population now sees Israel not as an embattled freedom fighters, but as a brutal genocidal regime. It's been revealed to people, maybe not to the leaders, but to billions of people across the world, that they wade through blood in order to force through their interests. That's very, very important in terms of what will come afterwards. But it also relates to me to the question about the United States of America, because it's clear, isn't it, that there is a tension between Biden and Netanyahu. Let's say straight away that if Israel had won in 2 months, there would be no such tension. Biden simply would have applauded them for carrying out effectively and efficiently and without too much trouble what they had wanted. But that hasn't happened. The incredible courage, resilience, and determination of the Palestinian people has prevented that. Secondly, that for all the blather, the weapons still come. The bombs are still being given to Netanyahu. So they complain, they shout, they wish it were different. Can you kill people? Rather fewer of them and with a bit less publicity, but nonetheless, the bombs still come. But there is a tension there, indisputably. And there clearly is a crisis of the Netanyahu regime as well, internally. But having said all that, I want to stress very much that I think there is no guarantee that that Zionism is going to come to an end. I don't know what schemes imperialism will come up with. Some fake version again of the two-state theory or whatever. Some call for reform. Some call for it to be nicer. But I think everything that you said, I agree with. At the same time, I think we have to stress so strongly that the only guarantor is the three elements of the resilience of the Palestinian people themselves: revolt, revolutionary revolt by workers and the poor in the Arab states, and crucially what we do here. Because if we could break the United States and Britain from their support for Israel, that would be the death cell of Zionism that we all seek so much.
Thank you very much, comrade. The comrade in the yellow shirt here is going to be followed by the comrade with the glasses here. Yeah. Got yellow shirt, and then comrade.
Hi, Ilan. My name is Hanain. Firstly, thank you so much for such an informative and insightful talk. I'm really honored to be here. Yeah, sorry. I just have a really quick question. What are your thoughts on armed resistance in the collapse of Israel?
Thank you very much, comrade. The comrade with the glasses here will be followed by the comrade with the green shirt. Who's got their hand up? Yeah.
Hi, my question is about academics and academic links with Israel, because I wanted to know what you think about the importance of those for Israel, and if we were able to break those links, what difference it would make. Because I teach at Oxford University, and it's been really inspiring to see the student encampment there, which is really raising this question, and particularly raising the fact that Oxford University has potentially all sorts of links we don't know about, and ones we do know about with Israel. And it's absolutely appalling that the way they've been treated by the new vice chancellor of the university. She refused to speak to the students about this issue. And then when they had an attempted occupation of the university offices, police were called and they were brutally treated and arrested and all the rest of it. And it was actually really good how the students put together a video interspersed with people being attacked and beaten by the police, with all the speech that the vice chancellor made at the start of when she first started Oxford University, saying what a progressive place Oxford University is, and it's about freedom of speech and all these values. And then, of course, the actual reality is this. But the thing is that, I mean, we've been I'm in the UCU union, and I think we've been very good in many ways in raising the Palestinian issue and about the academic boycott, but I think there could be a lot more to be done in terms of involving a much wider layer of academics in the university in support of, along with the students, and really talking about these links that Oxford University, I think universities all over the UK have with Israel. So I guess it's up to us really to build those links. My question is really, you know, would it make a difference if we could somehow stop these links? Because I think there's all sorts of things ranging from arms production to God knows what else that Oxford's involved in. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. The comrade with the green shirt will be followed by the comrade with the glasses here. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor. We were saying when we were chatting after your talk that no matter how many times we hear you speak, there's always interesting nuggets, so we get something new. So that's great. I wanted to focus on your use of the word endgame, particularly because I found it interesting that you see a recognition in the Zionist regime that they think that they're not gonna, there's not like a sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a constant battle to keep it up. And so I was wondering, for people who support Palestine, when do we get to jettison the word solution? Because I know that you have sort of gone into the debate about one state, two state solution. And I guess I'm agnostic about the one state, two state bit, but it's the word solution that's always bothered me. And it feels like almost like business management vocab has entered international relations. Even the British Empire had the humility to call it a partition plan, not a two-state solution. And I feel like we've been trapped by that, by saying that when this happens, when, you know, finally we reach that utopian stage, it's solved. And to badly paraphrase Fanon, the native, through struggle, when he defeats settler colonialism through struggle, he finds out that political life is an unending struggle. So I just want to say, when can I tell people, for example, in PSC, when they come to me and say, do you believe in one state solution or two state solution? When can I tell them to stop using the word solution, because it's not helpful? Thank you.
Thank you, comrade.
To pick up again on issue of how do we support the progressive movement in Palestine, and how we shorten this period of collapse, which other people have also mentioned. I'm just concerned that I see lots of movement from people in terms of really BDS and marches and protests, but very much lack of support from local government in England, in Europe, everywhere really in the world. This is a really stance. I can't even describe really this support for Israel, blind support. And all the world leaders, both nationally and internationally, are openly supporting Israel. And nothing comes, just words of, but no action. In practical action, yes, is support, military, financially. And that is reflected on the international organization as well. I'm thinking the United Nations. I'm thinking of the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. I mean, recently England has submitted an application to the International Criminal Court to stop the issue of the arrest warrant for Netanyahu. And so how do we how do we get there? Who does what, when, how? People are dying as we speak, literally. So will be too late. Thanks.
I just wanted to say I totally resonate. So first of all, I'm Egyptian. I totally resonate with the idea of that there's so much at stake here when we say the Israeli regime should go, that Israel as an apartheid system, an imperialist system should go. One of the questions that I get asked as an Egyptian, what is going on in Egypt? And I wanted to say that, take it back to the 2011 revolution, and in the streets, there was quickly a realization that the ruling class in Egypt thinks that they are there as one of their main reasons they are ruling this country is to actually protect the benefits, to protect Israel. And that, whether they were installed by Western imperialist forces or just supported, for example, when Trump came to power, he called the dictatorship, the dictator ruling Egypt now, my favorite dictator. My question is, so first I resonate with the idea that like there's so much at stake here, and freeing the Arab world is part of this as well. When we do this work, we're really not just freeing the Palestinian people, but everybody around. So there were so many Egyptians trying to protest since 2011 to date, and there are like tens of thousands of them now in prison. And even the idea of people protesting in the streets nowadays, even raising a Palestinian flag in Egypt, is almost banned, and people go to prison just by raising that. And so thanks a lot for doing what you're doing now. I could totally relate to that from a very different angle. And I think one of the questions I have is how the Arab regimes could kind of, how could we kind of get rid of the idea that the Arab regimes are actually just there to support Israel, to conduct more treaties, peace treaties with Israel, and so on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. The comrade in the checkered shirt will be followed by the comrade in the mask. Yeah.
Hello. This has been called the first live streamed genocide. And one element of that has been these videos uploaded by IDF soldiers in which they're sort of joking and taking pleasure in the destruction that they're wreaking. And I wonder if you have an insight as to why they're making these videos and what these videos tell us about the IDF and Israeli society. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. The comrade in the mask will be followed by the comrade in the purple shirt and the, yeah.
Hello.
Thank you.
Jim Roach from Dublin, Irish Anti-War Movement, Academics for Palestine, and I'm an officer in the Teachers Union of Ireland. Hello, Ilan, so good to hear you live for a change. Thanks very much. I want to come back to what you said at the very end. Our role is to show them how the Zionist endgame has collapsed. And I understand by them, it's all the liberal people that we have to work with, or people who are susceptible to liberal ideology. And some famous wit called the liberal, they're not right-wing, they're people who are against war and genocide, but not the ones that are happening right now. And this is the kind of problem you get talking to people. Oh, I'm not so sure about anti-Semitism, not sure about what Hamas did, not so sure about Israel's right, all that stuff. You have to kind of cut through that. And the best way to cut through it, I think, I said it yesterday at Tariq Ali's meeting, is to talk about apartheid. Israel is a rotten apartheid state. It is rotten apartheid state within the 1948 borders. And we start with that. And I don't know how many people here have watched Amnesty International's 15-minute video on Israeli apartheid. Hands up, please. Oh my God. Okay, you all need to watch it. But not only that, when we go back to our workplaces and our colleges, I'm a teacher, we tell that's where I start with, but just watch this video, okay? If you really want to understand the Israeli state, watch this video and maybe read Susan Howell's novel. And I introduced them slowly because I have to admit, 25 years ago, I did not know the difference between the West Bank and Gaza. And there are people out there, even now with all the media coverage, and it's questionable, of course, and people are catching up very quickly. So, and then I say, and then there's this guy, Professor Ilan Pappe, you really should read him as well. So you have to take people slow. We have to be really patient how we show them that the Zionist endgame has collapsed. One other reference is Nelson Mandela, and I know lots of people in this room may have some problems with Nelson Mandela, but to his dying day, he never relapsed on the idea that an oppressed people have a right to defend themselves with violence if needed. So and again, I say that because everyone recognizes Nelson Mandela as a great peacekeeper, great liberal, all that stuff. So my question, Ilan, to you is, and our problem in Ireland is, And you may think Ireland, the Irish government is progressive. It's not. We are really pushing them. We've got them to do much more than other European governments have done, partly because of the movement on the streets and in the colleges and the wonderful movement from the students. So the question to you is, how do I get the Irish government to sanction Israel, to stop buying drones from them, to stop buying dual purpose equipment? You know, in 2022, it was worth the 4.8 billion worth of stuff was imported from Israel by Irish firms and the Irish government. And the second question is, Ilan, when can you come to Dublin live? Thanks.
That's a good question. The comrade with the purple and the purple t-shirt with the glasses, give us a wave. Yeah, that's you. Yeah, will have to be our last contribution, comrades, because we need Ilan to come back. So yeah.
Yes, so many questions. I'm trying to like put up one in together. For me, it's like when we say we want to recognize the state of Palestine, and then we say we want the Jews and the Palestinians living in one country together. So what kind of question do we really ask? Because if we say we want one Palestine, and then we need to think about the thousands of Israelis that are there, and then some of them do not want that. So in terms of the realistic achievement that we're trying to have, both in the campaign and both in the people we want to convince, what does that, and also I think we need to ask the Palestinians what they want, but at the same time, what would be the most effective way to think about recognizing Palestine, by including the land that's been taken away, et cetera, et cetera. So really once and for all resolve the whole issue about, are we ever going to be able to resolve the issue like it was in 48? Probably not, so I don't know. But what is the real question about recognizing Palestine? And also in terms of the right to return, again, what is the best way to make that request, both to the government internationally and in the campaigns, for the right to return, for the Palestinian right to return to Palestine?
Great. Thank you so much, comrades. Comrades, thank you to everyone that spoke, and I'm really sorry for those that I didn't get to call. There's obviously a lot of us in here. A lot of us want to speak. Thank you for your patience. There's a few more sessions left of the day. I know we're very sad that it's the last day of Marxism, but there will be more sessions for people to speak in. So just before I hand back to Ilan to round us off, a few announcements. Bookmarks, the biggest socialist bookshop in Britain, is in the Jeremy Bentham room in the UCL main building. They have new books on China, the miners' strike, Red Shelley, William Blake, and of course, the complete works of Ilan Pappe. We've also got a stall at the front here where you can buy Ilan's books. So, you know, further reading to do after this session. Tonight as well, the French election, the second round takes place. At tonight's closing rally, Denis Godard, the French anti-fascist, will be joining us. So make sure you're there to round off a fantastic weekend. And finally, if you agree with us that it's been a great festival and that you don't want it to end, well, it doesn't have to, comrades, because you can join the Socialist Workers' Party. There's people with red forms around the room and outside the room. So have a think about joining us to continue the fight. So, Ilan, over to you. You've got 10 minutes, and I'll let you know when you've got a few minutes left. Good luck.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all of your excellent comments and questions, and thank you for those kind words that many of you have expressed. I really appreciate it. These are empowering and words and very rewarding. So thank you so much for that. I don't take it for granted that these are the kinds of response one gets. The first point that I think appeared in some of the questions in different versions was about the Arab world and the connection between the imperial or colonialist / imperial structure that still exists in the Arab world itself, and the link between possible processes there and the processes that we have discussed more profoundly are happening in historical Palestine. So first of all, probably two things to be said about it. One is the gap that some of you have pointed to between the position of the governments or the regimes and the position of the people. And that gap on Palestine is not just happening, or is just not visible in the Arab world. It's in almost the global north and the global south. Governments are not representing faithfully the position of many sections of the society on Palestine. And there's always a connection between the governments representing people's real problems, not just on Palestine, on poverty, on social justice and ecology, and so on, with the position on Palestine. It goes together, and I think that's why support for the struggle against injustice in Palestine symbolizes for so many people their own struggle against injustices in their own places. So the gap is not unique to the Arab world. And what is also not unique to the Arab world is that, like in so many other places in the world, we have very few leaders. We have quite a few rulers. In the Arab world, maybe it's more visible than in other parts of the world, also in Africa and so on, where you have rulers rather than leaders, and therefore the whole set of interest that informs their actions, not just on Palestine, almost every issue, is very different from the basic solidarity and emotions and I think and impulses of the people themselves. And I think the Arab Spring was one first attempt to change it. And historically, we never think that the first wave of revolution is the one that has to succeed. And there are counter-revolutionary periods after revolutions and so on. And I think we're just writing this chapter right now. So it's too early, too premature to put the lid on the possibility of a very revolutionary future in the Arab world that would definitely also influence the situation in Palestine, or a revolutionary change in Palestine that would influence the changes in the Arab world, which is also something our comrade from Egypt was talking about. But there's another point to this. The whole nation-state structure, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean, what in Arabic we call the Mashriq, that was built after the First World War by Britain and France mainly. The nation states that were imposed on a very different kind of a mosaic of communities that had much better relationship with each other than they have today, and had different political structures in mind for the future, but were imposed by colonialism and imperialism to adopt the European Westphalian nation-state model. This is collapsing not just in Palestine. It collapses in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Libya, in Yemen. I think the difference is that in every country, the collapse takes different place, a different form, because the problems are a bit different. So when I'm talking about the implosion from within the Israeli society as one of the indicators for the collapse of Zionism, there are different indicators in neighboring states, but they are all, well, the big meta structure that was built after the First World War is collapsing, which is both very dangerous because it can lead to chaos, and chaos leads to civil wars and violence, as we can see in Syria and Libya and Yemen, or it can be an opening for building a very different political structure, much more reflective of the people's social and economic needs. So we are in that moment there. As far as the United States, that's another point that people raise. I think that there was always an ideological, theological American support, which also has to do with the fact that also America is a settler colonial state with Israel. And there was, of course, the capitalist, imperialist interest. But despite the fact that money is still flowing from Washington to Israel and weapons are flowing, what the 7th of October has proved that you cannot deal with the Palestinian resistance with the fact that you'll have more weapons. That's not the issue. Maybe vis-a-vis Iran, maybe vis-a-vis Egypt, you need, the cutting edge military technology or even nuclear weapons if you want to deter them or even win a conventional war. But being the police state that you are, it's not a matter of how many weapons you will get from America, and it's not matter how much money you will get from America. We believe that people have the power, the resilience, and the resistance not to live as inmates in these two mega prisons. It may take longer, but they will succeed. There's very little doubt about it. We want to shorten it because of the suffering, not because without our help this will not happen. These kinds of mega prisons were there before in history, and there's not one case where they did not collapse. So it will collapse, but we want this collapse to be less violent for the benefit of everyone and to shorten it, because as long as it is there, the genocidal policies and other inhuman policies continue. And therefore, I think in the whole question of Biden and Trump that was raised as well, and the internal conflicts in America, there's one fact that it will go alongside the ability of the Palestinians, and there's no doubt about that ability, especially of the younger generation, to continue the resistance and the resilience. And the fact is that Israel is becoming the state of Judea. It becomes the state of the settlers. It becomes a theocracy. The whole game of being a liberal colonizer or a progressive ethnic cleanser is not working, even in the eyes of the Israeli Jewish electorate. And that will make it easier, even for liberals in the West, to become very suspicious whether Israel is a bonanza anymore, economically, strategically, and maybe some of them even morally. So I can see this erosion taking place, not only among our communities with which we identify ideologically and morally, but also in those which may have a different outlook on the world than we do, but nonetheless have some modicum of decency in them, and therefore I think would become very, very difficult in the future to have all these juggling, the world juggling that enabled them until today to defend genocide and apartheid and ethnic cleansing. I was asked quickly, how much more?
2 minutes.
We're done?
Okay. No, 2 minutes. You've got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. So very quickly, in telegraphs, armed struggle. Yes, of course, people under occupation have the right of the armed struggle. Will the armed struggle be important in the collapse? I think that was the question. It plays its part. I think it plays its part. I likened the 7th of October assault to an earthquake that shook a building that already had very fundamental cracks in its foundation, very extensive cracks in its foundation. So I think that's the role of the armed struggle there. Academia is very important. The boycott is important. It influences the more liberal, if you want, Zionists. It doesn't at all impress the settler state, one should say, but it's very important because we are creating or we are exposing the real face of Israel through that kind of boycott. And the real face is one of our biggest asset in the struggle for isolation and convincing governments like the Irish government to impose sanctions. I would look at the ICJ and ICC ruling as another step, an upgrade of the movement between boycott to sanctions. This is not just civil society act. This is also a message to the political elites. You're not doing enough. It's not enough, but it's a message in the right direction. Finally, on the state of Palestine, and I'm sorry if I missed some others because of lack of time. If I don't have more time, I will just say about the state of Palestine. I once was very skeptical when people said to me, are you not happy that this state or the other state is promising to recognize the state of Palestine? That was 10 years ago. I said, so what? They are recognizing the Bantustan, which is Area A in the West Bank. What's the great deal of recognizing the Palestinian Authority mini-state in the West Bank? I think the recognition for the state of Palestine today is not about the one state or the two state, and I agree, maybe we should get rid of the word solution on the way. It is against the denialism. The idea here is that you have some decent politicians in the states systems around us that understand that what Israel demands is not just sympathy for the trauma of the 7th of October. It demands a carte blanche for the genocide and a carte blanche for the total denial that there is Palestine and the Palestinians. So when people are now recognizing Palestine, I don't think they recognize a political entity that has clear boundaries. They are recognizing an idea, and they're recognizing people in a country that for 120 years, the Zionist movement and the lobby for that movement is trying to erase and expunge from geography and history. But they will not succeed. And we are doing, I don't have to tell people in the Socialist Workers' Party what they should do. They're doing everything they can. But if it doesn't impact the reality, we double, we triple what we are doing. And we're thinking out of the box, and we're thinking together with others. Yes, there's an urgent need to stop the genocide, and then let the Palestinians tell us what they need. Let them lead the way into the vision. Let them decide how they want to build a free Palestine. We don't have to tell them that. For too many years, the whole idea of the peace process was that Israel decides what will be the future of the Palestinians. I'm waiting for the Palestinians to tell me what is the future of the Jews in a liberated, decolonized, free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you.
Comrades, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the festival. Ilan, thank you so much for joining us.
See you soon. Thank you.